It's Sunday, September 27th, 2015, and you are listening to the Reel in the Field Goals Instant Reaction podcast that comes just after every Seahawks game. And they have just beaten the Chicago Bears 26 to nothing, a shutout. And we're going to get talking to that right about now. Just a reminder that Reel in the Field Goals is brought to you by the Ballard Agency, an insurance company run in Kirkland, an insurance agent working in Kirkland, Washington for over 50 years. And much experience that can help you get set up with the right insurance for your business, your personal, your car, whatever you need. Just go use the Ballard Agency and tell them the Field Goals sent you. That phone number is 425-454-3510. And tell them Field Goals sent you. All right, so the Bears did lose 26 to nothing to the Seahawks. We came into this game talking about how the first two Seahawks losses this year may not be quite indicative of their ability to play. Let's see how they do against some games at home, some teams that aren't so good. And then they came into this game with the Chicago Bears. We expected a pretty good win. They did win 26 to nothing, though there were probably still some problems that kept them from, converting some of those field goals, or some of those drives that ended in field goals instead of going for touchdowns. It seems like when the Bears, for a Bears team that really had no option to throw the ball, you would have expected maybe a little bit more dominance, but we'll get into that. Danny, what's your first thought here?
I mean, I think it really did feel like a typical Seahawks win, kind of slow start, a little bit sloggy and ugly in the first half, and then you kind of just outlast them in the second half. They kind of ran away with it, and it felt like a regular game. I think there was some frustration with how the offense was playing, and that's definitely a logical and rational thing to think. I think the first half the offense looked really pretty bad until the 2-minute drive at the end of the half there. But you're happy with how they played in the second half. Things kind of got better as the game went along. They really wore the Bears down, and overall happy with the game. Happy Jimmy Graham was really involved. They had some good plays on special teams. Richard Sherman had that fake punt return where they did what the Rams did last year, and everyone blocked on one side of the field, and then the kicking team fell for it, and Richard Sherman kind of ran up with it. And then obviously Tyler Lockett with another kick return touchdown. So there's a lot of good things happen in this game. It'll be fun to kind of break this game down this week.
Yeah, the Eagles, just an example, the Eagles scored 24 points today in their win, and after having a really poor start to their offense, and they did so without DeMarco Murray. So without DeMarco Murray, they played better. Today, Marshawn Lynch, he only plays in a part of the second quarter, and then in the second half, without Marshawn Lynch, the offense gets going a little bit. Not saying the two are related necessarily, but what did you think of Thomas Rawls? He finishes 16 carries for 104 yards.
I thought he looked really good. He's the kind of running back that the Seahawks want in terms of, I think he'll be a really good backup running back. And he runs really, really hard. He's physical. When he has an opportunity to bounce it outside, he can. I think he's got a little more juice as a runner than some of the other Seahawks running backs that we've seen over the last couple of years, and like Turbin and Spencer Ware, whoever. He's kind of got that burst that you like. I don't think he's going to break a ton of tackles. I think he's kind of a north-south guy that the Seahawks like, because he's going to punish you at the end of the run too. Like he was ramming guys at the end of those runs, putting his face mask into chests. Yeah, he looked pretty good. Obviously, there was that one play he dropped an open pass, but other than that, you got to be pretty happy with how he played, especially considering he was an undrafted free agent rookie. So,
if you're listening to this, and you haven't been listening to some of our off-season episodes of the podcast, and just a bit of a reminder of who Thomas Rawls is. I mean, this was a big-time recruit in Michigan coming out of high school. In Flint, Michigan. Then he went to the University of Michigan with high expectations, never be able to figure it out at Michigan. He transferred to Central Michigan, and last year rushed for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So maybe there is something there to continue to build on. There was a lot of talent at one point, and then he did have a good season. It was just at Central Michigan. So we'll see now with Marshawn Lynch and how serious his injuries are. which seemed to just sort of jump around his body from spot to spot as the game went on. As was hurt.
Oh, man.
We So, like I said earlier, the Bears, it didn't really seem like they came into this game thinking that they would have a hard time passing. It seemed like they came into this game thinking they will not be able to pass the ball. And,
Yeah.
there's a sort of a similar thing with the San Francisco today. As soon as they went down, Colin Kaepernick threw 4 interceptions in his first 10 passes, and then it was like, okay, we need to just start handing this ball off. That's not going to work. And but at a certain point, Jimmy Clausen had to throw it, and he ends the game 9 of 17 for 63 yards, 3.7 yards per attempt, a rating of 61.6. I like to sometimes, bad games by bad quarterbacks, I like to sometimes compare them to their career worst games and see, like, relatively speaking. But really, you go back to Clausen's rookie season, he had a couple games there back-to-back. One against the Bears, funny enough, he was 9 of 22 for 61 yards and an interception, rating of 29.7. And the next week against the Saints, he was 8 of 18 for 47 yards, no touchdowns, and an interception, 28.5. How much of this do you think was Jimmy Clausen? How much do you think was the Seahawks defense? How much do you think it was the fact that they didn't have their top 2 receivers? I mean, there's a lot working against Chicago in this game. Were you really encouraged by Seattle's defensive performance, or there just wasn't any offense to stop?
No, I think anytime you can get a shutout in the NFL, it's saying something. It's really, really hard to get a shutout in the NFL, period. And you have to be pretty happy with what they did. Again, it was kind of like in the first half, the Bears ran it all right, and then as the game went on, the Seahawks defense really shut that down completely, and their pass rush got going a little bit better. They just didn't really give the Bears any chance to do anything. So I actually feel good about the defensive performance. I think obviously there's the caveat that it was Jimmy Clausen and the Bears missing their top receiver and all that. But at the same time, I think the Seahawks really they did what they were supposed to do and shut them down. And there's nothing really to complain about on the defensive side of the ball. They gave up a few good runs, but at the end of the day, it was like, every single one of their drives ended in a punt. So I really don't know how. I mean, yes, you can say it's Clausen, and I mean, that's fine, and that's you understand that for sure. But at the same time, they did what they're supposed to do. You have to be happy about that. Every single one of their drives ended in a punt. Just no complaints.
Yeah, I mean, I would really say that the Bears' offense it looks super duper bad. With just telling, and as we said, their top 3 receivers would have to be Eddie Royal, Josh Bellamy, and Marquise Wilson. Eddie Royal caught all 3 of his targets, and they went for a whole 17 yards. Josh Bellamy had 2 targets, he caught 0. Marquise Wilson had 2 targets, he caught 0. Matt Forte had 3 targets, he caught 0. And Martellus Bennett caught 4 passes for 15 yards. So other than maybe like one time, he had a 21-yard throw to Zach Miller. I remember another one. I never really felt like, even though Jimmy Clausen didn't turn over the ball, I never really felt like he challenged anybody. It was mostly just the easiest pass imaginable that would go for 2 yards that you're going to give up all day.
Yeah, the only times they really rolled out and looked to go downfield, it ended up being like a scramble or a sack or a short little check down. And that's exactly what you want. I mean, that's what the Seahawks really just try to do is, just don't get beat deep. The one pass he had to Zach Miller up the seam, or I guess it was kind of like a route towards the sideline. That was a pretty good play. It looked for a second like KJ Wright was going to knock the ball out. He got his hand in there. So, I mean, even that play, I guess like the defense was solid anyway. But there's nothing really to complain about when it comes to the defense. In my opinion, I think they did exactly what you hoped they'd do.
It was really close to, it would have been nice to get a turnover. It was really, really close to getting not just a turnover, but a return for a touchdown on a sack late in the game by Cliff Averill that was recovered by Frank Clark. It was good to see Frank Clark's name mentioned, but they ruled Clausen was down. You got to think that maybe if they had ruled that it was a fumble and they reviewed it, that they would have upheld it just the same.
Yep.
It was that close. So unfortunate, but at the same day, you can't complain too much about a shutout. Were you paying a lot of attention to Cam Chancellor today and his performance?
I think he played well, especially considering it was kind of his first time out there. He didn't do anything super tangible in the sense like I think I saw he only had one tackle, but to me it looked like he played really solid. He had a couple of plays where he was kind of, in on the pile. You know how the Seahawks kind of gang tackle when it happens. He was right there, and they didn't complete any passes in his area as far as I can remember. So I think he did a good job. Obviously I think it's a little bit of a transition for him coming back, and I know that he didn't play every drive or series or whatever. So they're kind of, I think, easing him in a little bit, but I think you could kind of tell the emotional factor was there. They kind of, just felt like they had their whole team there, and no one was trying to do more than what they should be doing and kind of thing. And so I think that was good, but nothing super tangible in terms of having him back other than, he was in there on a couple of run stops, but yeah, nothing major.
Just around the defense, KJ Wright led the team with 10 tackles. Bobby Wagner had 7 and shared a sack with Bruce Irvin. Also, Bobby Wagner had 2 QB hits, which I want to ask you about Chris Richard's play calling today. It seemed like they were a little bit more aggressive, would you say?
Yeah, I think on third downs, that was a nice thing for them to do because, Jimmy Clausen's not, he's not the kind of guy who's going to stare down the gun barrel and really make a throw like in the face of pressure. And that proved to be correct. Like I said, every time they rolled back or did it like a longer 7-step drop to throw deep, he was immediately pressured and ended up kind of dropping his eyes and trying to escape rather than throwing the ball downfield. So that's exactly what you want. And Richard called up a couple of blitzes on those plays in order to do that. And so I like that. I think it was aggressive. You don't want to sit back and let some backup kind of pick you apart. You want to go at him and make him make some really, really tough throws. And if he does, then you adjust. But he just didn't. So I like that they kind of stuck with it and, mixed up some blitzes. They brought linebackers a couple of times. And so, yeah, it was a good game plan, I think.
Danny, I don't know. Do you think that anybody coming into the game, I don't know, I didn't hear anything personally, but maybe you did. Do you think anyone coming into the game felt that Jimmy Graham should get more targets?
I knew where you were going with that. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's like, thank God we can put that narrative to rest for a week at least. I saw a stat earlier this week, even before this game. Jimmy Graham was second among tight ends in red zone targets in the NFL behind Heath Miller. Obviously, in this game, he got a couple more, at least one more on that fade route. That's one of those plays where I think literally 9 times out of 10 he makes that play. I think he kind of missed. So what happened is he tried to box the guy out, and the guy guarding him in the end zone kind of slipped his block, so it knocked Jimmy Graham off balance. And as he was falling backwards, he tried to jump up for it. So in other words, he should have. If it worked perfectly, he would have boxed him and then had full balance as he jumped up to grab the ball. But it was just one of those bang bang plays. He kind of like tried to block out. The guy, moved from behind him, and so he fell backwards before he could jump, and it just didn't work out. But I think that's like the exact play you dial up. That's exactly what you want. Russell Wilson made a good throw. I think it was right on the money. It was just one of those things that was bang, bang. It didn't quite work out. He still got 2 hands on it. It was a close play. But I think what happened was Jimmy Graham got off balance as he went to jump and ended up not getting any vertical on it, and that's why it didn't work out. But, that they schemed for it. They got the matchup they wanted, and they got the throw they wanted. So you have to feel pretty good about that, honestly. I think those touchdowns will come. So he really should have had 2 touchdowns in this game.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, like,
showing up.
As frustrating as this game was in the first half, the Seahawks were up just 6-0. As frustrating as this game was in the first half, it was really because of how close they were to that touchdown to Jimmy Graham, how close they were, and they had 3 shots at that touchdown at the end of the first half. They didn't get it. How close they were to a touchdown to Tyler Lockett late in the game that on a deep pass that he had his hands on and he just couldn't grab it. That was Lockett's only target of the game. He didn't grab it. It would have been a tough catch, but when you think about that kind of stuff, they won by 26-0, and even though I think that they still have their offense looked really bad for a while, and I thought the defense should have maybe clamped down a little bit more. It's hard to complain too much about the defense, just like the fact that Matt Forte, when he was really getting what he wanted, and that was the only guy you had to stop. So that was a little bit like frustrating, I guess. But they could have won this game 45-0 if that's how close some of those other things went. So,
Yeah, I mean, and
and
again, like you can't really expect perfection. Like let's lower our
yeah,
expectations a little bit. But that
even
said,
how
they did lose Mebane early in the game, and that
yeah,
probably screwed up some of their run defense ability because he's that guy right in the middle, setting the setting the tone.
yeah.
So
Did anyone say anything on Twitter about the injuries for the Seahawks with Mebane and Lynch, and anything that's come out yet about their status?
no, not seeing anything. I think what I heard was Mebane had a groin injury. Marshawn, it was a hamstring after he had injured his calf last weekend. So,
Okay.
hopefully that's not like indicative of what this season is going to be like in terms of Lynch kind of wearing down.
Yeah,
But yeah,
we talked about we talked a lot about Marshawn Lynch last week, and as far as his motivation, and if he's out there any different today, he was if he was injured, that's obviously a reason why he wouldn't be performing that well. But 5 carries for 14 yards overall in the season, he's being outrushed by Russell Wilson, who has 139 yards rushing, and he's the leader on the team. And now with Thomas Rawls, he's right behind Lynch, which who would have guessed that? Now
right.
after 3 games, Thomas Rawls only has a few less yards than Marshawn Lynch. Um, at some point we have to sadly face the fact that every player hits a wall. Marshawn Lynch being a 29-year-old running back, a lot of running backs hit that wall around then. Do you see any of that in there, or it's too soon to judge?
I mean, I think it's too soon to judge at this point. But that said, it's a little bit concerning. I think you can tell the difference. When Rawls got in there, Rawls runs. He's just faster than
Uh,
Lynch. But that being said, obviously Lynch's skill set is a lot different. It's more based on short area quickness and power and things like that. So it's
let's say
been
this: he's had 38 carries this season. Have you seen a Marshawn Lynch, quote unquote, Marshawn Lynch run?
yeah, we've seen a few. We have. I think
Yeah.
he's pushed the pile on a couple of plays. That's shown up a few times. It's not as often as you'd like, but I'm not panicking at this point, especially considering it sounds like he was hurt in last game, hurt all week this game, and then those injuries tend to be related. So hopefully it's nothing major. I'm not panicked at this point yet, but it's something to watch because, like you said, it happens to everybody, and he hasn't really looked that great yet, to be honest. So
Right.
yeah,
Well,
it's
with child judgment,
something to watch. What's that?
we don't. Well, we don't have. We can't yet speak to because the Detroit Lions have not played yet. That'll be next week's game for the Seahawks at home. We could talk a little bit about how they performed this week to get a little bit of an amp up to what maybe to expect. But the 0-2 Lions, they play tonight against the Denver Broncos. The other thing, I guess, would just be that the Bears came into this game with a terrible defense, and it seemed like they played okay defense today. Would you
Yeah,
say that the Bears played pretty good defense?
yeah, I think they played pretty well. They had some interesting things happen. Like in the end of the first half, they all backed up to about the 4 or 5 yard line, 3 yard line, and just let the Seahawks come at them. And it was like they were literally asking Seattle to just run short yardage stuff, which was really interesting. Like, come on, we can stop this compared to what they were doing from a little bit further out. So that was interesting. And Vic Fangio, that's the Bears' new defensive coordinator. He obviously has a lot of experience against the Seahawks. So in terms of game planning, he's been playing the Seahawks for the last whatever how many years. So you have to expect him to. It's almost like a divisional matchup in that sense, just from the game planning point of view. But that said, they did play a little bit better than you'd hope. The offense definitely got things going and looked like themselves in the second half, though. So I again, like we talked about this before. Last year, the Seahawks had the #1 DVOA in the second half on both defense and offense. They're a second half team. That's kind of the thing. They feel people out. They test things here and there in the first half. Obviously, everyone wants them to start sooner, but like this is something we've been dealing with for literally the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't totally out of control. As far as the Bears' defense, it's not like they played great because the Seahawks rushed 29 times for 159 yards, 5.5 yards per carry. That's the most rushing yards the Bears have given up this season so far.
Mm.
And Russell Wilson, 20 of 30, 235 yards, a touchdown, 101.4 rating, which pretty much goes in line with what the Bears were allowing to Aaron Rodgers and Carson Palmer in their 2 losses. Speaking of which, let's just take a moment in this Instant Reaction podcast to instantly react to something else around the league. We've talked a lot about the Cardinals, but today they win 47-7 over the 49ers. An absolutely dominating performance, and in fact, they've scored 48 points last week against the Bears. They scored 47 against the 49ers this week. They are by far the leading team in points. The Patriots might have a couple more, but that's just because the Patriots have also scored a ridiculous amount of points. But the Cardinals, the Seahawks first play Arizona after the bye week in Week 10, so they have some time for Carson Palmer to get hurt. What are you what are you thinking about the Cardinals today?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted it out earlier on. It right now, and this is how the NFL season goes. Obviously, it's peaks and valleys for everyone, and things change as you go along. But right now, to me, it looks like the Patriots and the Cardinals might be the 2 best teams in the NFL. We'll see what Green Bay does tomorrow night, and they're definitely still up there. But man, I mean, when you score 48 and then 47 like 2 weeks running, like that is something. We were saying that even against a bad team, getting a shutout is a big deal in the NFL. Like scoring 48 points in the NFL is a big deal. And so the Cardinals' offense looks really, really good. And obviously their defense is great too. Obviously their defense scored at least 2 touchdowns. I don't know if they got any other points on special teams or anything like that. But 2 pick sixes to start out the game, and then they kind of just bombs away. They did the Cardinals thing, and they're looking really good. So they're a team right now, I think, to beat in the NFC West. In terms of who the Seahawks are going to have to beat to get in front of, and so. Hopefully the Rams can beat them or something. Someone's gonna have to start stepping up to the Cardinals, but and then at the same time, I think the Patriots look just kind of unstoppable right now. Obviously they were playing the Jaguars, but
yeah. Well, it was a game of 2s for Arizona. Carson Palmer throws 2 touchdowns and 311 yards. He's now got 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions through 3 games. Chris Johnson comes back. He carries 110 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. Larry Fitzgerald's 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Larry Fitzgerald has 333 yards and 5 touchdowns in 3 games. And Tyrann Mathieu, 2 interceptions, his first 2 interceptions of the season. But you look around and you look at that secondary, and you got Tony Jefferson. He has an interception. You got Tyrann Mathieu. He has 2 interceptions. You got Justin Bethel. He has an interception. You got Gerard Powers. He has an interception. You got Rashad Johnson.
Have any interceptions yet?
Patrick Peterson. He has an interception. Do you think that the Cardinals secondary right now is better than the Seahawks secondary?
Well, I don't know about better. Right now, they're definitely doing what the plan is in terms of pressuring a shitload up front, forcing you to make bad passes, and then taking advantage of it. And that's what the Seahawks want to do as well. But they are definitely capitalizing on it more than the Seahawks right now. I think, the first 2 games, I would say easily the Cardinals secondary is better than the Seahawks. But now that the Seahawks have Cam Chancellor back, we'll see. Obviously pitching a shutout is huge. But it's like there's pretty much no way to argue it. The Seahawks defense was not good the first 2 weeks. So this was a huge step forward, and we'll see what happens. It's a long season, but right now I would give the edge to the Cardinals simply because, I mean, you said it, they have 7 interceptions already?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, and the Seahawks have 0, so.
Yeah, and it's, I would say the Cardinals, they have played the 0-3 Saints in Week 1. They played the 0-3 Bears in Week 2. They played the 1-2 49ers this week, and the 49ers have been blown out in consecutive weeks. It already starts to look like Jim Tomsula may have been a mistake, I think, in my opinion. It's not just so much that they're getting their asses kicked, and they still were supposed to have some pretty talented players. Colin Kaepernick and Carlos Hyde and Anquan Bolden and Vernon Davis and Torrey Smith and Joe Staley, all just on offense, and then Navarro Bowman and Antoine Bethea. look awful. And then after it's just pick, really felt like in the second, at that point they were just like, God, okay, how do we run this clock down and go home? And so I don't really know, I don't think that if the 49ers really do go 2-14, I don't think Jim Tomsula is going to get a second season personally, but
May not, yeah.
we'll leave that for that. And yeah, the Jim, and just another small note, just that Chuck Pagano, I think, barely escaped what it could have been, the Colts' third loss, this time to the Titans. The Titans aren't able to convert on a 2-point conversion to tie the game at the end of that one.
Yeah.
And that was one of the, I'm thinking about coaches that could be the first to be fired, and I think Jim Tomsula, Chuck Pagano, unfortunately Gus Bradley got blown out today. But it was another win for Dan Quinn and the Falcons.
It was good.
Yeah, they played. Brandon Weeden played surprisingly good, but the Falcons pulled it out, and we talked about their upcoming schedule.
Yeah, the Cowboys looked pretty interesting in the first half there, and then they, it went off the rails in the second half for sure.
I mean, it's really, like we can say, just like today in the Bears game, it's really hard to, and in the NFL, I think it's really hard to, anybody can do anything for a quarter or a half, but to hold it up for a whole game is pretty hard.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I always talk about, when people are, and football is an emotional sport, and there's swings and peaks and valleys, but like whenever people are like, saying, oh, we didn't play well in so-and-so's like quarter or half or whatever, it's like you cannot expect perfection in 4 quarters every week. It just does not happen. It will never happen. You're going to be, bound to be disappointed 95% of the time. So the bottom line is, and this is why the whole Seahawks thing is like, win in the first quarter or second quarter. It's like you got to wear teams down as it goes along. And that's what the Seahawks have done the last 4 years. That's what they did all last year. So, I mean, that's really what to focus on, like putting it all together. It's you obviously want them to start faster, but, it really is kind of how you finish. So as gay and trite as that is, but it is true.
And we just have to remember, like everything, like the first 2 games, when you take everything you can't, it sort of magnifies the problems, or in some cases for some teams it makes them look better than they are when you look at the numbers, and then you have to have the full collection of all of the games to really get a feel of how good or bad they are. And the reason I bring that up, Seahawks come into this game 29th in points allowed. They come out of this game 10th in points allowed. So it's just sort of, you got to give it some time and see the perspective of like, oh yeah, well they pitched a shutout. Yeah, it's like, yeah, they pitched a shutout, and then that brings all the fucking numbers down so that
it's huge. That's huge.
Equalizes. And we will wrap up this instant reaction podcast. Just a little quick hitter for Seahawks fans to listen to get some more information on the game. The Seahawks beat the Bears 26-0. They outscored them 20-0 in the second half. Got going a little bit on the rhythm with Russell Wilson. Thomas Rawls played well in relief of Marshawn Lynch. We don't know how seriously injured Marshawn Lynch is. And Jimmy Graham.
Carroll said that they don't think it's serious.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ever believe it's serious, but hey, the Jay Cutler missed today with a hamstring injury that probably started out as not knowing how serious it was, but
yeah.
True. But yeah, it's because I don't even know exactly. I mean, I guess I know what a hamstring is, but I don't really know.
Biggest muscles in your body.
Is that true?
I believe.
I feel like I just had this thought the other day. I feel like every organ is like 10 times bigger than your entire body. Like everyone's like, oh, did you know that your skin can stretch across America? Or like, you know that your large intestines can go around the world 80 times?
Do you know that if you connect all of your veins and capillaries, it would go to the moon?
Exactly. How the fuck? It's like all of these organs are
possible, but yeah.
Did you know that like your liver is the size of a house? I mean, I don't. How did all these organs come together to form?
I think it's Uberfacts that Twitter account Uberfacts that always has really fake facts. I think that's the problem.
You guys stop getting these fake facts spread out there. Anyway, Yeah, so that's the wrap up there. I did want to put together just some of these other numbers, but yeah, so just some of the other numbers. Total yards: Seattle 371 to 146. Uh, Time of possession, they beat that 32 minutes to 27 minutes, 17 first downs to 7 first downs. And that's pretty impressive considering that I think it started out Chicago had like 6 first downs and Seahawks had like 1. Seattle was having a hard time getting that first down and second first down, but they did get on the rhythm. So hopefully they can carry that into next week at home against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. So that means your instant reaction will be Monday night, Tuesday morning, and hopefully another win to get them back to 500 before traveling to Cincinnati. Dan, I know we didn't get the Lions game yet this week, but any early thoughts on Detroit?
Well, and the thing to watch tonight is what happens with Stafford. He was out, I think, with rib injuries this week in practice, and they were waiting until the last second to kind of figure out whether he's going to play or not. I haven't seen that, but I imagine he's going to play.
Mhm.
So, when you're playing a really, really good pass rush like Detroit, or like Denver, I should say, his health is kind of the thing to watch this game. So if you're listening to this right after the Seahawks just won and kind of watching Sunday Night Football, like, keep an eye on what happens with Stafford because, the Lions are going to be a lot different if they don't have Stafford next week. So see how he plays. If the ribs really bother him, if they take a sack or two, like, he could potentially, aggravate that injury. So that's the thing to watch, I think. And their offense has just been not very good. So
Yeah, and their defense hasn't been very good either. But talked about the Seahawks' tough schedule. The Lions play 3 of their first 4 games on the road, so that's also even a little tougher than Seattle. I mean, they had to go to San Diego in week 1, Minnesota in week 2. They get Denver at home tonight, and then at Seattle, and then they get the Cardinals. So it's very possible that the Lions could be a decent team that might go 0-5.
wow.
Before they get the Bears in week 6. So yeah, that's a tough one, but they have to watch it. They gave up 28 first downs to the Chargers, 388 passing yards, and then last week 199 rushing yards to the Vikings. And I don't know that the Denver has a very good offense unless Peyton Manning starts to get some of that arm strength back.
Yeah.
But their defense does look like it could be top 5. No.
Yeah, I really like Denver's defense a lot. I think they're really good. They're good in all phases. They have a really good pass rush. They have a great secondary, and their linebackers are underrated. Brandon Marshall, the linebacker, is kind of one of these guys that people don't know a ton about, but he's a really good weak side linebacker for the Broncos. So that defense is good. Plus with Wade Phillips running that thing, I really just like everything about it. So they'll be fun to watch.
Yep, we'll see what happens tonight, and then next week, Monday Night Football. It's not something that I think Pete Carroll has ever lost on with the Seahawks. So
They are good in prime time.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, and we'll talk more about the Detroit game this Thursday on the next episode of Real in the Field Goals.